At the last minute, we threw in Lucien Carr. He would disappear from Pecos City and come back years later, darkened by African suns, with an African queen for a wife, and 10 black children, and a fortune in gold. Bill Burroughs would go mad one day, start shooting the whole town from his window. They'd set the torch to his old house, and everything would burn. And Pecos City would be a charred ruins, a ghost town in the orange rocks. We looked around for a likely site. The sun was going down. I fell asleep, dreaming of the legend. Neal and Luanne parked the car near Van Horn and made love while I slept. I woke up just as we were rolling down the tremendous Rio Grande Valley through Clint and Isleta to El Paso. And Luanne jumped to the back seat and I jumped to the front seat and we rode along. And to our left, the vast Rio Grande spaces were Moorish, reddish mounts of the Mexican border. Soft dusk played on the peaks. Beyond lay adobe houses, blue nights, shawls, guitar music, and mysteries, and the future of Neal and myself. Straight ahead lay the distant lights of El Paso, sown in a tremendous valley so big that you could see several railroads puffing at the same time in every direction, and as though it was the valley of the world. We descended into it. "Clint, Texas," said Neal. He had the radio on to a Clint station. Every 15 minutes they played a record. The rest of the time it was all commercials about a correspondence high school course. "This program is beamed all over the West," cried Neal excitedly. "Man, I used to listen to it day and night in reform school and in prison. All of us used to write in. You get a high school diploma by mail. Facsimile, of course. If you pass the test, all the young wranglers in the West, I don't care who at one time or another, they write in for this. It's all they hear. You tune in the radio station in Sterling, Colorado, Lusk, Wyoming, I don't care where. You get Clint, Texas, and the music is always cowboy, hillbilly, and Mexican, and absolutely the worst program in the entire country, and nobody can do anything about it. They have a tremendous beam. They got the land hogtied, man." We saw the high antenna beyond the shacks of Clint. "Oh, man, the things I could tell you," cried Neal, almost weeping. Eyes bent on Frisco and the coast, we came into El Paso as it got dark. Broke. We absolutely had to get some money for further gas or we'd never make it. We tried everything. We buzzed the travel bureau, but no one was going west that night. The travel bureau is where you go for share the gas rides, legal in the West. Shifty characters wait with battered suitcases. No, we went to the Greyhound bus station to try to persuade anybody from taking a bus for the coast and giving us the money instead. We were too bashful to approach anyone. We wandered around sadly. It was cold outside. A college boy was sweating at the sight of a luscious Luanne and trying to look unconcerned. Neal and I consulted the matter but decided we weren't pimps. Suddenly, a crazy, dumb young kid fresh out of reform school attached himself to us, and he and Neal rushed out for a beer. "Come on, man. Let's go mash somebody on the head and get his money." "Ooh, I dig you, man," said Neal. They rushed off, and for a moment I was worried, but Neal only wanted to dig the streets of El Paso and the kid and get his kicks. They straggled off. Luanne and I waited in the car. She put her arms around me and made love. I said, "Damn it, Luanne, wait till we get to Frisco." "I don't care. Neal's going to leave me anyway." "When are you going back to Denver?" "I don't know. I don't care what I'm doing. Can I go back east with you?" "We'll have to get some money in Frisco. I know where you can get a job in a lunch cart behind the counter. I'll be a waitress. I know a hotel where we can stay on credit. We'll stick together." "Gee, I'm sad." "What are you sad about, kid?" "I'm sad about everything. Oh, damn, I wish Neal wasn't so crazy now." Neal came twinkling back, giggling in the streets, and jumped in the car. "Hey, what a crazy cat that was. Whoo, did I dig him?" I used to know thousands of guys like that. They're all the same. Their minds work, uniforms, clockwork. No time. And he shot up the car, hunched over the wheel, and we roared out of El Paso. "We'll just have to pick up some hitchhikers. I'm positive we'll find some. Hup, hup, here we go. Look out," he yelled at a motorist. And he swung around him and dodged a truck and bounced over the city limits. Across the river were the jewel lights of Juarez. And Luanne was watching Neal as she watched him clear across the country and back, out of the corner of her eye, with a sullen, sad air, as though she wanted to cut off his head and hide it in her closet. An envious and rueful love that she knew never would bear fruit because he was too mad. Neal was convinced Luanne was a whore. He confided in me that she was a pathological liar. But when she watched him like this, it was love, too. And when Neal noticed, he always turned with his false flirtatious smile where a moment ago he was only dreaming in his eternity. Then Luanne and I both laughed, and Neal gave no sign of discomfiture, just a goofy, glad grin that said to us, "Ain't we getting our kicks anyway?" And that was it. Outside El Paso, in the darkness, we saw a small, huddled figure with a thumb stuck out. It was our promised hitchhiker. We pulled up and backed to his side. "How much money you got, kid?" The kid had no money. He was about 17, pale, strange, with one undeveloped, crippled hand and no suitcase. "Ain't he sweet?" said Neal, turning to me with serious awe. "Come on in, fella. We'll take you out." The kid saw his advantage. He said he had an aunt in Tulare, California, who owned a grocery store, and as soon as we got there, he'd have some money for us. And Neal rolled on the floor laughing. It was so much like the kid in Carolina. "Yes, yes," he yelled. "We've all got aunts. Let's go. Let's see the aunts and the uncles and the grocery stores all the way along the ride and even get our kicks." And we had a new passenger. And a fine little guy he turned out to be, too. He didn't say a word. He listened to us. After a minute of Neal's talk, he was probably convinced he had joined a car of madmen. He said he was hitchhiking from Alabama to Oregon, where his home was. We asked him what he was doing in Alabama. "I went to visit my uncle. He said he'd have a job for me in a lumber mill. The job fell through, so I'm coming back home." "Going home," said Neal. "Going home. Yes, I know we'll take you home. Far as Frisco, anyhow." But we didn't have any money. Then it occurred to me that I could borrow $5 from my old friend, Alan Harrington, in Tucson, Arizona. Immediately, Neal said it was all settled, and we were going to Tucson. And we did. Passing Las Cruces, New Mexico in the night, the same Las Cruces that had been Neal's pivot on the way east. We arrived in Arizona at dawn, and I woke up from a deep sleep to find everybody sleeping like lambs in the car parked. God knows where. Because I couldn't see out the steamy windows. I got out of the car, we were parked in the mountains, and there was a heaven of a sunrise. Cool purple airs, red mountainsides, emerald pastures in the valleys, dew and transmuting clouds of gold, and gopher holes, cactus, mesquite. It was time for me to drive on. I pushed Neal and the kid over and went down the mountain with the clutch in and the motor off to save the gas. In this manner, I rolled into Benson, Arizona. It occurred to me that I had a pocket watch someone had given me in New York for a birthday present. And at the filling station, I asked the man if he knew a pawn shop in Benson. It was right next door to the station. So I knocked. Someone got out of the bed, and in a minute, I had $1 for the watch. It went right into the tank. Now we had enough gas for Tucson, but suddenly a big pistol-packing trooper appeared, just as I was ready to pull out and asked to see my driver's license. The fellow in the back seat has the license," I said. Neal and Luanne were sleeping together under a blanket. The cop told Neal to come out. Suddenly, he whipped out his gun, and he yelled, "Keep your hands up!" "Officer," I heard Neal say in the most unctuous and ridiculous tones. "Officer, I was only buttoning my fish." Even the cop almost smiled. Neal came out, muddy, ragged, T-shirted, rubbing his belly, cursing, looking everywhere for his license and his car papers, and the cop rummaged through our back trunk. All the papers were square. "Only checking up," he said with a broad smile. "You can go now. Benson ain't a bad town, actually. You might actually enjoy it if you had breakfast here." Yeah, said Neal, paying absolutely no attention to him, and drove off. We all sighed with relief. The police are suspicious when a gang of youngsters comes by in a new car without a cent in their pockets and have to pawn watches. Oh, they're always interfering, said Neal. But he was a much better cop than that rat in Virginia. They try to make headline arrests. They think every car going by is some big Chicago gang. They ain't got nothing else to do. We drove on to Tucson. Tucson is situated in a beautiful mesquite riverbed country overlooked by the snowy Catalina Range. The city is one big construction job. The people, transient, wild, ambitious, busy, gay, wash lines, trailers, bustling downtown streets with banners, altogether very Californian. Fort Lowell Road, out where H lived, wound along a lovely riverbed into the flat desert. We passed innumerable Mexican shacks in the shady sand, till at last a few adobe houses appeared, and the rural P.O. box with Alan Harrington's name shining like the promised land. We saw Harrington himself brooding in the yard. The poor fellow never dreamed what was bowling down on him. He was a writer. He had come to Arizona to work on his book in peace. He was a tall, gangly, shy satirist who mumbled to you with his head turned away and always said funny things. His wife and baby were with him in the adobe house, a small one that his Indian stepfather had built. His mother lived across the yard in her own house. She was an excited American woman who loved pottery, beads, and books. Harrington had heard of Neal through letters from New York. We came down on him like a cloud, every one of us hungry. Even Alfred, the hitchhiker. Harrington was wearing an old Harvard sweater and smoking a pipe in the keen desert air. His mother came out and invited us into her kitchen to eat. We cooked noodles in a great pot. I wanted to meet Harrington's wild Indian stepfather. He was nowhere around. He got drunk for days on end and howled in the desert like a coyote till the cops threw him in jail. Harrington's 6 Indian cousins were also in jail at the time. Neal kept saying, "Oh, do I dig her," about his mother. She showed us her favorite rugs and chatted with us like a child. The Harringtons were from Boston. "Who's that fellow with the embryonic hand?" asked H, looking away. "Is that Al Dinkle?" No. We left him in New Orleans. "Why are you all going to the coast?" I don't know. To add to the confusion, John Holmes's mother suddenly appeared in the yard. She was driving east with friends and had stopped by to see Mrs. H. Neal shuffled and bowed in the sand, and he talked to her. And now there were 7 visitors going both ways, roaming around the yard. H's little boy Steve darted among us on his bicycle, and we all drove to the Crossroads liquor store, where Harrington cashed a check for $5 and handed me the money. Then he said we might as well visit his friend who had a ranch in the canyon, John. We drove up and piled into the guy's house. John was a big gigolo with a beard, married to the girl who owned the ranch, and they had an immense picture window in the living room that looked out over the Mesquite Valley. They had bop records, everything to drink, a maid, 2 children who came home from school on horseback, and every conceivable comfort. An immense party took place. It started in the afternoon and it ended at midnight. And once I looked out the picture window and saw Alan Harrington galloping by on a horse with a shot of whiskey in his hand. Neal did tremendous, feverish things with a big, handsome, bearded John. He took him out for a ride in the Hudson, apparently demonstrated his soul by driving 100 miles an hour, then by weaving languidly in the traffic, then by barely missing posts and cactus. So when they came back, John gripped my arm and said, "Are you going all the way to the coast with that crazy cat? If I were you, I wouldn't try it. That cat is really crazy." He and Neal were both sweating with excitement. There were new dents on the car. The maid was preparing a big ranch dinner for us in the kitchen. Neal tried to make her. Then he tried to make John's wife. John tried to make Luanne. And poor little Alfred fell asleep exhausted on our living room rug. He was a long ways from Alabama and a long ways from Oregon and suddenly thrown into a frantic ranch party in the mountains of the night. When Neal vanished with the pretty wife and John went upstairs with Luanne, I was beginning to get scared things would explode before we had time to eat, so I ladled out some chili with the maid's permission and ate standing up. I began to hear arguments and crashing glass upstairs. John's wife was throwing things at him, and I went out and rode the old horse a half-mile down the valley and back. Harrington came running and leaping over the mesquite with a shot glass in his hand for me. It was almost empty when he reached me. We heard roaring bop music and cries from their house. What are we doing here? I thought, looking up as the beautiful Arizona stars gleamed. John came running out of the house and leaped on the horse, dug his heels in, whacked his hand, and galloped lickety-split into the darkness. He was blowing off some steam. The horse had to stand all the punishment of our madness. It was just an old horse, and he could hardly run. And finally, John passed out. And we woke up Alfred and got in a car and drove back to Harrington's house. There was a brief goodbye. "It certainly was pleasant," said Harrington, looking away. Beyond some trees, across the sand, a great neon sign of a roadhouse glowed red. Harrington always went there for a beer when he was tired of writing. He was very lonely. He wanted to get back to New York. It was sad to see his tall figure receding in the dark as we drove away, just as the other figures in New York and New Orleans. They stand uncertainly underneath the immense skies, and everything about them is drowned. Where go? What do? What for? Sleep. But this foolish gang was bending onwards. Outside Tucson, we saw another hitchhiker in the dark road. There was an Okie from Bakersfield, California, who put down his story. "Hot damn! I left Bakersfield with the travel bureau car and left my guitar in the trunk of another one, and they never showed up. Guitar and cowboy duds. You see, I'm a musician. I was headed for Arizona to play with Johnny McCaw's Sagebrush Cowboys. Well, hell, here I am in Arizona, broke, and my guitar's been stole. You boys drive me back to Bakersfield. I'll get the money from my brother. How much you want?" He wanted just enough gas to make Frisco from Bakersfield, about $3. That's what we wanted. Now, we were 5 in the car. Off we went. I began recognizing towns in Arizona I'd passed back in 1947, Wickenburg, Salome, Quartzsite. In the Mojave Desert, I drove a car for an hour in a tremendous crosswind that threw shrouds of sand across the headlamps and bucked the car from side to side, and then we started climbing. Our plan was to avoid LA traffic and just make it to San Bernardino and the Tehachapi Pass. In the middle of the night, we overtopped the lights of Palm Springs. From a mountain road at dawn and snowy passes, we labored towards the town of Mojave, which was the entryway to the great Tehachapi Pass. Mojave is in the valley formed by the desert plateau, descending to the west and the high Sierras straight ahead north. The whole place a bewildering view of the ends of the world, with railroads toiling in all directions in the vastness and sending up smoke signals like nation to nation. The Okie woke up and told funny stories. Sweet little Alfred was smiling. Okie told us he knew a man who forgave his wife for shooting him and got her out of jail, only to be shot a second time. We were passing a woman's prison when he told it. Up ahead, we saw the Tehachapi Pass starting up, and Neal took the wheel and carried us clear to the top of the world. We passed a great shroudy cement factory in the canyon, and we started down. Neal cut off the gas, threw in the clutch, and negotiated every hairpin turn, and passed cars, and did everything in the books without the benefit of acceleration. I held on tight. Sometimes the road went up again briefly. He merely passed cars without a sound. He knew every rhythm and every kick of a first-class pass. When it was time to do a U-turn around a low stone wall that overlooked the bottom of the world, he just leaned far over to his left, hands on the wheel, carried it that way, and when the turn snaked to the right again, this time with a cliff on our left, he leaned far to the right, making Luanne and me lean with him, and we negotiated thus. In this way, we floated down to the San Joaquin Valley, It lay spread a mile below, virtually on the floor of California, green and wondrous from our aerial shelf. We made 30 miles without using gas.